That's the economist's view. Despite their economic strength, Germans fear for the worst. They believe that the country has passed its zenith, says Mrs. Kocher, the pollster. This pessimism shapes Germany's dealings with the rest of the world. Unlike most countries, Germany is not driven by any great ambition, but rather a fear that things could fall apart if they do not hold on to stability, suggests Mr. Colburn, the American ambassador, former American ambassador. This year's Euro crisis brought out both the apprehension and the arrogance. With Greece's near default, the promises that the euro would be as stable as the Deutschmark suddenly looked like the lie that the Germans always suspected it to be, in the economist's view. As the crisis mounted, Mrs. Merkel delayed giving German backing to the inevitable rescue for the wobbly euro countries. A 750 billion euro package was eventually agreed on after a hectic weekend of negotiation in May. To Germans, this looked like the start of the dreaded transfer union, a bottomless commitment to subsidise Greeks' early retirement, fix an Italian budget tattered by tax evasion, and clear up after Spain's bust property bubble. Sell your islands, you bankrupt Greeks, and the Acropolis while you're at it, demanded Der Bild, a popular German tabloid. Mrs. Merkel played to the gallery by suggesting that the persistent Euro sinners would be thrown out of the group. This must be much to the delight of the anti-Euro crowd, in my view. These un-European outbursts startled not just Greeks, who brandished swastikas in response, but Europeans generally. They had grown up believing that the Germans saw their own interests as inseparable from those of their fellow Europeans. Now they glimpsed a different, ugly German, smug about his economy and untroubled by his past. Some pundits argued that Germany's brutality towards Greece during the Second World War should have tempered its irritation with the Greeks. I think that's quite absurd. The crisis has created a new pecking order, at least temporarily. Germany, with its high competitive, low debt economy, is on top. The rest are having to adjust, including France, traditionally a joint leader of the European project. I think arguably it's really always been England and Germany who have been the leaders of the European project because of the creation of the European Union through the European principally German and British English universities. This for France was unsettling. You get an enormous sense of German self-righteousness, which is very difficult to take, especially when there are solid foundations for it, says Francois Heiselberg of the International Institute for Strategic Studies. France, which has lagged behind Germany in making structural reforms, feels its influence waning. France has to do its homework to be able to restore some level of influence in Europe, says Jean-Pierre Jouyet, a former French Minister for Europe, now head of France's Financial Regulatory Authority. Whatever became of Gemütlichkeit, it's even difficult for me to say, and I've been to Germany many times. Even during the golden age of European integration, Germany was an awkward partner. Too big to be first among equals, but too small to dominate, as Helmut Kohl, the Chancellor who unified Germany, put it. It never lost sight of its own interests. As early as 1960, France and West Germany clashed over the founding of Europe's common agricultural policy. France regarded the Deutschmark as an instrument of economic terror, forcing it to either shadow the Bundesbank's monetary policy or to devalue the French franc. Long before the euro arrived in 1999, The German finance minister of the day, Thilo Wagel, vowed that it would bear the German hallmark, in inverted commas. Still, the tone changed under Mr. Kohl's successor, Gerhard Schroeder, who headed a coalition of Social Democrats and Greens from 1998 to 2005. He was unembarrassed to flex Germany's newly acquired muscles and to employ the sort of language heard from leaders of more nakedly nationalistic countries, such as the United States, I might argue. He accused Brussels of blowing taxpayers' money. He made his quarrel with the United States over Iraq and the war that followed the centrepiece of his 2002 campaign for re-election was Iraq, and an unprecedented affront to Germany's most important ally, the United States. With Vladimir Putin's Russia, Mr. Schroeder was poodle-like. The two men agreed to build an undersea gas pipeline from Russia to Germany, bypassing Central Europe and the Baltic states, which Poles denounced as a second Molotov-Ribbentrop pact. There's a little bit of anti-German sentiment there with The Economist. After Mr. Schroeder's pugnacity, Mrs. Merkel's consensus style looked like a return to German form. She was instrumental in ensuring the passage of the Lisbon Treaty, which is supposed to help the EU cope with its expansion to 27 members and creates machinery for EU foreign policy. She repaired relations with Germany's eastern neighbours, reassured the United States, and pandered less to Russia. As a Euro builder, she soon showed that she was not in Mr. Kohl's class. During the economic crisis, her first instinct had been to double the guard around the German Treasury. She backed the appointment of relative lightweights for both European EU presidency and the foreign minister's job created by the Lisbon Treaty. I'm not sure what the EU president would think of that. Under Merkel, Germany is no longer an actor that supports supranational developments, as Hans Stark of the French Institute for International Relations. The assumption now, he says, is that individual governments, not the European collective, will remain the general principal actors, and Germany has to adapt to that. Germany's brightest business prospects do not involve its slow-growing neighbours, the charismatic economies of Asia, Pacific, and Latin America. Principally, we're speaking about China and Brazil, I think, there. A German acceptance of Turkish membership of the EU looks less likely than ever. Relations between Germany and France, traditionally the twin motors of the European integration project, are volatile. The methodical Mrs. Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy, the impulsive French president, are not natural partners. He recently quoted Mrs. Merkel as saying that Germany was about to put in place a policy of expelling gypsies just like France, which drew sharp denial from the Chancellery of Germany. When previous German chancellors and French presidents clicked, the relationship cascaded down to other levels, says Mr. Heisberg, the French strategist. This is totally lacking now, today. Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Sarkozy managed to resolve the crisis as they threatened to spin out of control, but Franco-German ambitions for the euro are spluttered. German standoffishness toward the EU is now based in law. A 2009 ruling by Germany's Constitutional Court allowed it to ratify the Lisbon Treaty, but limited further transfer of powers to Brussels. But soon the court may weigh in on the Eurozone bailout itself.